Today we are going through a healer in the Midnight beta. We have gone through a few DPS specs, but it was easier to test how DPS were doing and their changes in Midnight when you can simply stick to a bunch of target dummies and check out their rotations. But when it comes to a healer, it's a bit harder to test, right? You would have needed something a bit more practical, like say Mythic Plus being available or the Raid being available, so that you can actually try out how a healer feels, right? So with that being available in the past few days, we have been able to check out the healers. We're going to be able to have in a couple of days also the overall look, the so-called Feely crafting tier list of how the healers have been doing so far in the beta. But we start with what we feel like is one of the best, at least. So we want to start on a positive note before we have to start dooming on all of the desperate healer specs we have right now in the beta. So we start with Preservation Evoker. We said one of the best. It's not that we are starting from a good note coming from live, coming from the War Within, because compared to where we are now, Evoker is losing quite a lot in its tools. For starters, obviously, Flame Shaper, what you have played the entire expansion, is going away because Engulf as an actual button, as an actual mega AoE button is gone. When you play Flame Shaper, you no longer have the actual button. Now Consume Flame is a very minor, very tiny blow-up explosion, which shouldn't even be called explosion since it's on single target. It doesn't even do the big AoE it does now in live. But on top of that though, you lose a bunch of other things. You do lose, for starters, Emerald Communion. You do lose Spirit Bloom as buttons. You do practically lose Dreamflight, because if you put Dreamflight as a choice node next to Stasis, you might as well have lost Dreamflight as a button, because you're not going to use this. So these are already some pretty hefty buttons you are losing, right? It's 1, it's 2, it's 3, and as well as your Communion button. So it's already a pretty significant loss. Now Blizzard has also, on the path of pruning and simplifying the game, removed a few of the more management buffs like Call of Ysera. Now your buff of your Dreamflight needs to come from Verdant Embrace, so you always have to press Verdant Embrace at least some 20-ish seconds before you cast Dream Breath to make sure you have this buff. So every time you have to do the Verdant Embrace and then use your Dream Breath if you wanted the buff, if you wanted Dream Breath to be much stronger. Now it's passive. Now Dream Breath is always buffed by 20%. You no longer need to remind yourself to Verdant Embrace before you use Dream Breath in order to make it strong. The rest when it comes to talent placements has been more or less the same. You have gotten a handful of new talents added, like the choice node between no longer making you possibly kill yourself while flying with Verdant Embrace or giving you a second charge of Verdant Embrace, as well as turning basically your current tier set into a talent. Right now in terms of tier sets in live, you have the Engulf giving you the buff that makes you have 25% stronger heal over time power. So if I do Dream Breath and then I do double Engulf, I'm gonna get this buff that gives me 50% more hot as well as dot value. Now instead it's just a follow-up of Stasis, so just if you want to make your cooldown stronger. The rest though is very similar. You have gotten a couple of new talents here, but you have lost a major one. Funny, because in this new expansion Blizzard will be pushing hard for you to play with Blossom, but you lose the bigger talent of Blossom, which is Cycle of Life. This is essentially the mini cloud burst attached to Blossom, which is going away basically in the beta. Now you do gain a few other things, like this one is very cool. Casting Blossom makes you double cast Echo. So you save 2 essences. One of the major deficits of the difference between pressing Echo and pressing Blossom, of course, is that Echo costed 2 essence and that Blossom costed 3. So it was much pricier. It did come at a benefit, the benefit that now when you get the discount, when you get your burst, which discounts your next essence, obviously pressing Blossom is much stronger because now you get a 3 essence discount. Now this talent makes it tilt more in favor of playing with Blossom, because now you get 2 essence discounted after every Blossom because you double cast Echo. It also makes you save 1 GCD, because instead of having to cast Echo, you only cast Echo once and you get 2 of them for the price of 1 cast. So it is very good. But the rest is basically the same. You know, this setup right here is basically identical to this setup. Like, there is no change. The only change is the buttons that have been removed, which is Spirit Bloom and Emerald Communion, with Unshakable Empower buff that has been moved in place of one of the removed ones. And the follow-up of Emerald Communion is now one that you will very likely, very often take, 10-second discount on Dream Breath. This looks different just because this is in a Mythic Plus setup, so you get your second charge of Time Dilation, but the rest is very, very similar. Now, because it's beta, of course, and you don't know how you will be playing with, you do feel like you have a ton of options to put your talents into, because now that Emerald Blossom is much more viable, you could be saying, okay, then I want to play with Blossom, so I need these 3 talents. And then there are other synergistic talents with Blossom, like you don't play with the 15% stronger Bronze, Healing, and Absorption to play with the double Echo cast. You might even ditch the extra healing from the targets on reversion and go for the Essence Burst, increases the effectiveness of your next Essence ability by 35%. This is much more valuable compared to Live, because if you play with Blossom, the Essence ability that you're casting is much more valuable than just pressing Echo, which it wasn't very valuable to buff Echo by 35%, right? But buffing Blossom by 35% is much more valuable. In terms of hero talents to sort of possibly enhance the playstyle, right? We have seen some hero talents already from the DPS specs we have gone through, which were interesting, as well as they sort of powered up some of your toolkits, like the Shadow Priest's focus on shadowy operations with your Apex talents, which was very strong for your spec, and others a bit more passive, sort of in the background, not really that valuable or effective, like the Balanced Druid one. For Evoker, it is extremely strong. As far as healers go, it's probably the strongest one of the Apex talents, because this part is fine in terms of gameplay. You know, when you do Dream Breath, you have a guarantee to upgrade your reversion into Meritra's Blessing, which is basically Spirit Bloom, right? When you use it, it even has the same animation as Spirit Bloom, and the concept is the same. You heal 5 players instantly, which is kind of what Spirit Bloom used to do, right? So it will look even the same as you use it in between a bunch of other players. You use this, and a bunch of stuff flies around and heal players, right? So Meritra's Blessing is guaranteed on your Dream Breath, 100% chance to gain it, and then it's random RNG whenever you use reversion. So it further sort of encourages you to play with reversion, spam reversions around the raid, wait for the big hit, and then the big hit comes. You already proc this already, so you use this, everyone gets healed because of your echoes with Meritra's Blessing. You can do it again with the normal reversion, or guarantee it with Dream Breath, and you instantly gain it. This is even if your reversion didn't have any charges, right? Even if this is empty, if you proc Meritra's Blessing not having charges, doesn't matter. Like right now, I only have 1 charge. If I use it, it doesn't proc. If I use Dream Breath, I force it to proc. It's still available, even if reversion didn't have charges. It instantly becomes available. It basically resets the cooldown. Now, the other thing about this, though, isn't just the Meritra's Blessing, which is fine. If you look at the actual values of this Meritra's Blessing, if you play with reversion a lot, then it's pretty valuable. This is in Mythic Plus. If you move on to a raid setting, like the raid testing that just happened, it's still valuable. It's still a lot of healing, okay? But this becomes even more valuable, especially in the raid with this tool right here. Reversion protects allies, reversing 4% of all damage taken and turning that 4% damage taken into healing. This is super strong. So this is the value of the passive. The tooltip is broken. The tooltip just says reversion instantly heals the target for 15% of damage taken, which is just the tooltip of Golden Hour. It's just broken. But this value right here is very powerful. This is basically a pseudo damage reduction, because yes, technically you still take the damage, but then 4% of it gets instantly healed back. So it is quite valuable. The entire combo that you can get from these effects, both the Meritra's Blessing plus the reversion healing passive, is quite powerful. And obviously it encourages you to play around your temporal anomaly and your reversion. So now when it comes to your healing combos you can do, Spirit Bloom is out. because you can't Spirit Bloom. You can, I guess you can do it yourself, Spirit Bloom, when Reversion turns into Meritra's Blessing, so you can either wait for the RNG of Reversion to turn it into Meritra's Blessing, or force it from Dream Breath to use it as a heal, which, as we said, works with Temporal Anomaly, so you can spread Meritra's Blessing through Temporal Anomaly. Those are the main ways for you to heal were already with Temporal Anomaly into Reversion or Temporal Anomaly into Dream Breath. The third one now has gotten a bit weaker. Now the ability to use Temporal Anomaly and then heal everyone with Verdant Embrace instantly. It has gotten a bit weaker because Lifebind has changed. As you can see, Lifebind here is much longer now. The reason why it's much longer is because now it only works on you and the ally you Verdant Embrace, and not the entire group of players you just healed with Verdant Embrace. This means that if I use Temporal Anomaly, alright, and I cover multiple players with my echoes, and then I Verdant Embrace, this buff won't be shared amongst all of them. So the value, the value of healing with Verdant Embrace for spreading Lifebind is now gone, which also means there is no point right now, for example, to keep a communion in the game. This wouldn't work in the beta with Lifebind, because Lifebind is not gonna spread to 20 players, so this value won't be there to share the healing across 20 players right now in the Midnight beta. The other thing is that now with this sort of style where you Temporal Anomaly and Dream Breath, or Temporal Anomaly for example and Meritra's Blessing or Reversion, you have these three sort of options. The buff is long enough that you can wait for a new one, and then you can use Meritra's Blessing to just spread it everywhere. You have the extra now of Emerald Blossom, as we said. So basically you might even have more options than before, even though you have lost Spirit Bloom, right? You technically have lost Spirit Bloom, but because Reversion can turn into Spirit Bloom, and because you still have Temporal Anomaly, you still have Dream Breath, now you also have Meritra's Blessing, which will become available more often than Spirit Bloom, because it will become available every time you Dream Breath, which has a similar cooldown as Spirit Bloom. Plus, it has its own chance to proc when you use Reversion, so it is even more available than Spirit Bloom, and now you can make plays around Emerald Blossom more than what you can right now in live. You know what we said when we complained talking about survival, that their Apex talents does change their ability because it changes Raptor Strike into Raptor Swipe, but we complained that you were still gonna press the same button. The feel wasn't gonna change. It was a melee targeted hit that was changing into a melee AoE hit, but you were still spamming it in the same rotation, nothing was changing. In the case of Evoker, changing a hot into an instant hit, right, it is much more effective. It can have way different uses, right? You can save this for when the big AoE comes, after you use Temporal Anomaly, and then the AoE comes, and then you use Meritra's Blessing, right? It has different uses compared to what we went over last time with Survival, right? And also the fact that it's RNG, it gives a bit more of a dynamic compared to Survival, where it's like Raptor Strike, swipe, strike, swipe, always 1-2, 1-2, 1-2. In this case, in the case of Evoker, it's less obvious when it's gonna proc or not from Reversion, and also the guarantee after you cast Dream Breath. So in terms of playstyle, it actually can get more varied than you actually are right now in live, especially given assuming the Blossom build will become like somewhat playable, especially in the raid. In the raid, it's more likely to work than it is in Mythic Plus, right? So this already makes it more valuable, more interesting than you had in live if Blossom works. 2, you have the point of your hero talents. Right now, Flame Shaper has more value simply because you have this point right here. Dream Breath and Fire Breath gain an additional charge. Well, we just said Meritra's Blessing is guaranteed every time you Dream Breath. So if you can get 2 charges, if you can, for example, stack up on 2 charges before a big AoE phase happens, you could be doing Dream Breath into Meritra's Blessing into Temporal Anomaly, cast a couple of echoes to a bunch of players, this procs by itself, you can use it, then you Dream Breath again, procs again, and you can use it again. So it allows you way more freedom, way more flexibility on gaining power from Meritra's Blessing. If you get 2 charges of Dream Breath, right? They keep coming back off cooldown and you keep transitioning from Reversion to Meritra's Blessing. Obviously, you have the negative of losing Engulf, losing Consume Flame. Now it's only this instant heal on a single player. So for example, if I were to Dream Breath a bunch of players and then Verdant Embrace myself, if you look at the healing done, if you look at the combat log here, and we look at what happened, you will notice that the actual Consume Flame that I used after I Lifebinded only healed me, right? Consume Flame only went on me. It didn't heal everyone in AoE like it used to do in live. It only becomes essentially a single target heal. You would have to make this work, you would have to create an entire setup where first you spread echoes to apply Dream Breath on everyone, and then you spread echoes again to apply Verdant Embrace on everyone. But that would require like 30 plus seconds long worth of a setup, which is just not worth right now. You also do gain something as Flame Shaper, which you weren't gaining before, what made Chrono Warden the way to go in Mythic Plus, for example, which was the damage. So giving you the second charge of Fire Breath is just more upfront burst in Mythic Plus for Mythic Plus packs, right? It's just more damage than you had before when playing Flame Shaper, because of course right now in live you weren't going to use Engulf on the enemies for AoE damage, right? So now instead gaining the second charge of Fire Breath just makes your damage go up and be more comparable to Chrono Warden. And you can still benefit from having the second charge of Dream Breath for your Meritra's Blessing procs. You are a bit, if anything negative, you are a bit more constrained now when it comes to your Stasis buildups. Because right now your Stasis buildups in live exist to buff your Engulf. So if you want to do it the fast way, you just do Stasis into Dream Breath, Engulf, and then you release it, and that's your Mega Burst, right? Or the other version is to use Dream Breath first, and then put into Stasis Temporal Anomaly after the 2 Engulfs, because this way you can instant Reversion, because you Reversion has a chance to generate Essence Bursts, and Essence Bursts can be exploded with your Tierset for more healing. All of this goes away, of course, in live, that you lose this power, so your Stasis becomes more old school, becomes like, let's put Stasis and then put Temporal Anomaly into Dream Breath, which guarantees Meritra's Blessing, and use it. And Meritra's Blessing can be stored into Stasis now. So when you reopen Stasis, you will also get Meritra's Blessing right over here. It becomes more standard. It becomes similar to the Stasis you used to go for as Chrono Warden or before Flame Shaper became a thing. There is still, of course, the other option, which is the Triple Blossom. If you're playing the Blossom build, you stack up on some of the free hits, then you Stasis, you go first Blossom, you go second Blossom. As you get the third essence, you go third Blossom, and they all get stored up in Stasis. You can still also do that. You also have, as a minor addition, your Tierset does at least do something. As we know, this season 1 Tiersets are pretty boring and straightforward, but this one at the very least does something cool. Verdant Embrace grows an Emerald Blossom on your target at 100% effectiveness. So just free Blossom. It's a full natural blossom. As you see, it spawned a second one. So all of these tools work, including, for example, casting Emerald Blossom, causing your next echo to be double cast. Even if you get it for free, so even if I use my Verdant Embrace, I still get the buff. I still get the free echo from Verdant Embrace. So it's even more value to this talent thanks to your Tierset. Now you can do Verdant Embrace, double echo, and then you can do normal Blossom, double echo again, and then you can do Verdant Embrace, or maybe Temporal Anomaly, get some Reversion, get some free echoes, and then you can do Verdant Embrace, double echo. It is just a lot of free essences, a lot of free cheats of essences from your Blossom, both because you're casting Blossom yourself and getting the double cast, and then you're using Verdant Embrace, which casts Blossom, which gives you the double cast. So it's a lot of value coming from the Tierset. This Tierset could have been Verdant Embrace heals for 20% more, Dream Breath heals for 20% more. That's it, right? Passive in the background, automatic, changes nothing. Instead, it does actually do things that can make your playstyle more varied. Now your Tierset gives you something else to do after your Verdant Embrace, which is a free double casted Echo, for example. So that's why we mentioned Preservation first, because all of these things actually do make Preservation as, maybe not as complex, not as in-depth, I guess, as Live, but it stays very close. The amount of variety you can have in your choices between your Temporal Anomaly, your Dream Breath, the procced Merithra's Blessing, the Verdant Embrace, giving you the double cast of your Echo Reversions, having a chance to proc Merithra's Blessing as well, your Emerald Blossoms as a heal, your Temporal Anomaly into Reversion or Dream Breath as a heal, the fact that you get the double casts of your Echo from your Blossoms, but also from your Verdant Embrace because of your Tierset. All of these things do vary the buttons you're pressing a lot, both in the raid and in Mythic Plus. A lot of this will of course hinge on whether or not this will finally be viable in a competitive setting, or if once again Blossom builds will be a meme. If Blossom builds will be a meme, it does, weaken, I guess, the variety of the spec by a bit. It doesn't make it, nearly as, I guess, varied compared to what it could be, but it is still quite good. It's still one of the more complex healer specs. It still has a lot of variety in both the raid and Mythic Plus, so it does look very good coming into Midnight. Of course, as you have been seeing from these clips, what looks not good at all for a spec like Preservation is the absolutely disgusting frames that we have, having to navigate who to heal when your players can have 2 buff icons of Dream Breath, 2 buff icons of Reversion, the buff icon of the Anomaly Absorb Shield, and now even the buff icon of Verdant Embrace, and the Lifebind it leaves behind. It gets way too crowded, so hoping that Preservation won't be suffering too much from the frames we will get in Midnight. The spec itself still looks quite strong, still looks quite good, quite fun to play, even despite the pruning and the losing of their abilities. So, as we said for the other DPS specs, giving them a rating, a first initial rating on how they look, a Preservation right now is a solid 9 out of 10. Very, very good so far in the beta. So, with our first healer having been analyzed on the Midnight beta, this is where we can stop for this Friday. I can leave you to, according to some experts, the beginning of your weekend. With this out of the way, we can now leave each other. We're starting the goodbyes by thanking everyone for having watched the video, together with, of course, everyone else who has been supporting completely for free by liking and commenting down below, as well as subscribing to the channel itself. Now, with these things out of the way, thank you guys again for watching. See you guys tomorrow, and in the meantime, yeah, we kind of went again longer than expected. This was just a single healer. Why was this so long?